Let's start. So good morning, and today we'll discuss about the entourage effects of cannabis. So in herbology, in Ayurveda, we already know this exists, and this exists in almost all the herb medicines. So whenever we use herb medicines, it is not just one molecule that acts on the human body. It is a range of alkaloids that they act. Right. So like last time when I had shown you one photo in which there are three parts of cannabis plant. One is the cannabinoids, another one is the terpene content, and the third one is the flavonoids. So if you see them individually, they have been studied individually and they have been studied in combined form. But we in India, because we have the herbal medicines available, so we see this entourage effects very well. Now here you'll get some confusions, and that confusion is what I had told you earlier, and those confusions will come out now when I explain you about entourage effects. So entourage effect is not a new term; it's just a old thing, but because it was recoined by Raphael Mechoulam, and he said that when all the molecules of the plant, when they act together on human body, the action is totally different than what we saw with THC or CBD, or even with CBD and THC. So if you see only the cannabinoid profile, the action is different. But when you encourage all the kind of entourage effects, the body reacts in a very different way, in a very harmonious way. So what is entourage effect? So this chart I had shown you earlier also. So entourage effect is something like this. So you have the CBN, CBTSC, CBDV, CBDL, CBC, the cannabinoids. So you have the cannabinoid content on one side. Then you have the terpene content, the natural essential oils that are present in cannabis plant. And you have flavonoids. And flavonoids are those contents which gives flavor to the cannabis. So you know each people who are into smelling flowers, cannabis flowers, they understand that each flower is different. Each flower scent, each flower appearance, each flower's effect are different. So it is same like what I can put that like somebody who's testing alcohol. So you have a specialist, they test and they say like tea testers, you know, the prime essence is what they want. So same way you have the cannabis testers also, which they test all these things. But since in India we don't have that leisure act, which I think it should come in by the end of this year. So entourage effect is because of the cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids together. So it is also known as cannabis synergy. Okay, so other term is cannabis synergy. So we know that cannabis sativa, indica, or whichever it is, it produces hundreds of phytomolecules, including the phytocannabinoids, the terpenes, and the flavonoids. So these phytomolecules, they interact, causing enhanced biological effects. And these enhanced effects are known as entourage effects. And these entourage effects are of two kinds. One is intra-entourage, and one is inter-entourage. Okay, so intra-entourage effect is resulting from the interaction among phytocannabinoids and terpenes altogether. Inter-entourage effects are interaction between phytocannabinoids itself. So you have phytocannabinoids itself acting, terpenes itself acting, flavonoids itself having some effects, and you have a combined effects of all these things. So now here is what the interesting study that was done. When there is entourage effect, it eliminates the biphasic response in favor of a linear dose response curve. Like I was telling you, the biphasic response of CBD and THC, right? Small doses have different effect, high doses have different effect. But when you give as a plant molecule, as a plant extract, it has a totally different molecule. So there is no biphasic response. The biphasic response is very minimal, or the biphasic response is largely restricted to brain case, neurological cases, but not to other cases. Like in cancer, you don't see these effects. Like when you keep increasing the dose, you can keep increasing the dose. You can stop also. You can keep giving without any tolerance or without any biphasic response. So there is no observed ceiling effect. So it's not like a peak effect is there, then it comes down. So it has a steady effect, you know. So it has a steady effect. This is one confusion which you will see, right? Because I told you about biphasic response. So far, for to start with cannabis prescription, you should remember that it has biphasic response, because we don't know how that individual will respond to certain oils. Some individuals, they respond with biphasic effect. Some individuals, they don't respond with that. But when we use it as a whole extract, the effect reduces. The biphasic response is largely nil, you can say, other than in neurological cases. And then there was this particular study which was done in 2018, which demonstrated that, you know, cannabis extract, if used in human breast cancer, has much better effect on cancer cells than giving only THC. So we know that THC definitely it causes apoptosis, it causes eliminates the metastasis, it eliminates the stops the blood flow to the cell if you give. But when you give the whole cannabis extract, it was there was one more experiment which is not mentioned, but which she had discussed. There is one doctor by name is Dr. Sanchez. She did a study and she found that Cannabis Synergy is the best way to treat for in cancers. So if you use the whole thing, you get better effect than, you know, using one thing. So the two if things that will be there is the biphasic response. So now you should understand that the biphasic response can be there, because sensitive people will definitely demonstrate biphasic response. But most of that, with the existing medicines that we have in India, we will largely not get this biphasic response. So we get usually a very linear dose response. So the dose is like straight, and then peak may reached, and that peak effect will continue as it is. It doesn't go down. So these are the two doubts. I hope I'll deal with that in more question answers. Now, how does they, like they say, principal component analysis. When you analyze, how do they do? So you have this. Okay. So you have this, like the broad, the highlighted are the cannabinoids. So you have some definite interactions here, which was done. This was an experiment which was done by one study. So when they studied this components of cannabis, they actually took some strains. They actually took 7 strains. They took 7 strains to study on this. And this, they found that one strain had better effect in one kind of cancer, another strain had better effect in another kind of cancer. So then they wanted to actually analyze what are these. And when they analyzed, they found that there is this. This is one strain, this is second strain, third strain, and this is fourth strain. And then they found that there is definite interaction within them, which actually give for the enhanced effect on this. So this, I am just putting this so that you understand. So like, for example, in Indian plants, beta-carotene is very high. All the plants that I have tested personally, in them beta-carotene content is high. That's why if you test, you see that there is a peppery taste in Cannabis sativa plant. Even in Cannabis indica, which is there, in that also beta-carotene content is high. And there is myrcene, which is specially seen in indica. Humulene is not there in Indian plants. I don't know why. And the other things are not there. Even linalool is not there in Indian plants. So I really don't understand. But this beta-ocimine, nerodilol, these are the flavonoids. And we know today that all flavonoids together, they act as antioxidant. They bring down the free radical injury effects. So this was the study done. I'm just highlighting you to show that, you know, these are the studies which have been done. And they have seen that there is definite synergy in particular strain, and some strains have better action than other strains. Now, how does this occur? You know, so how does this happen? So there is a synergy within the endocannabinoid system, and there is a synergy because of the cannabis plant. In endocannabinoid system, we know that there is anandamide, AEA, 2AG, virodamide, NADA, OEA, PEA. I'll deal with that when we do that extended endocannabinoid system once again. So all these things are there. So we know that anandamide just doesn't act on CB1 and CB2 receptors alone. It also acts on TRP receptors, it acts on PPAR receptors, it acts on GPR, it acts on adenosine receptors, it acts on a variety of receptors. So when it acts on variety of receptors, then it has a variety of action. So endocannabinoid system in totality is so complicated to understand because we usually concentrate on CB1 and CB2. But what about the rest of the receptors? So when you combine all the studies together, endocannabinoid system itself brings about a fantastic entourage effect. So even if there is AEA, but it has an entourage effect. So it brings about an entourage effect in a very different kind, because of which there is persistent homeostasis. There was one paper recently published in which they said that they have found about 102 endocannabinoids. So you can imagine 102 endocannabinoids, out of which they have grouped anandamide like, 2AG like, and others. So you can see that there is so much synergy within the endocannabinoid system, but within the cannabinoids also, so we've seen that there is greater efficacy of cannabis extract. So when we see CBD, THC, THCA, CBDA, THCV, CBDV, all this together, it has very different effect as such. So that has, like for example, if you take CBD and THC alone, so suppose you take CBD and THC mix and give, they act better than CBD alone and THC alone. So these combinations are available now in US, where they combine CBD and THC, CBD and CBG, CBD, CBDA, THC, THCA, all these things they combine, and they have seen. So they bring about what we call as intra-entourage effects. And then there is the wholesome plant extract, which I prefer, to which brings about the total inter-entourage effect. The cannabinoids, the flavonoids, and the terpenes all together. So you see, when the whole plant is given, the first effect that you see is antioxidant effect. Anti-aging effect you see is the first thing. And then you see parallelly that cannabinoids are acting in their own way, terpenes are acting in their own way, and flavonoids are acting in their own way. I am going to take one class on just botany of cannabis, because that is also needed, because in that I can explain you more detail. Okay. Now, this is the very important findings from one recent paper which was published. I have given the paper this also down, that so they concluded this for, it is a recent paper in 2020 it was published, and in this they said that there is a significant correlation. Their conclusion was there is a significant correlation between certain terpenoids and the phytocannabinoids in various certain, because I told they studied 7 strains. And they found that one strain is very good in breast cancer, the other strain is very good in brain cancer, the other strain is very good in pancreatic cancer. So if you see, the whole plant itself has a different effect. So we in India can't do that at present, but in future it will come. And then we will have this, say for example, Afghani Kush has better action on brain cancer. And there is this what you call a Durban poison. Durban poison is very good in diabetes. So something, all those things will come. Though I know only about 30 strains, but there are so many which are there. So, and when we see this, then again we lose the basic ground strains, because these strains are largely non-ground strains, or which are developed in the greenhouses. So again, it has their own advantages, disadvantages, so we need not go into that. So terpenoids present in relative, terpenoid content is just 2%. You should imagine. In cannabis, the terpenoid content is just 2%. There are people who add extra terpenes, which are actually taken from some other source. Those should be avoided, because I know there are 2 brands who does that. And I told them that I'm sorry, I can't support you, because those doesn't work. They can cause allergic reactions. Suppose, like say, for example, beta-caryophyllene. Beta-caryophyllene is very good anti-inflammatory, and it is very good anti-asthmatic agent. And it is also seen in pepper. and pepper. So you can give extra pepper for them. Like bioperine, you can give them extra instead of putting that bioperine extract in cannabis, right? So that will have better action. So terpenoids, they are usually present in about 2 to 2.5%. Only that much content is there. They are relatively minute amounts in cannabis extract and possess no therapeutic effect by themselves at these concentrations. But actually, if you see terpenoids in 2%, it doesn't have any action, because whatever study they have done is in a huge amount. Like beta-carotene has been studied, linalool has been studied, myrcene has been studied, and then this what was that? One more was this cariophilic acid. Cariophilic acid. This have been extensively studied, but these have been studied in their own individual strengths. But in cannabis, they are present in very small content, and that small content itself is important, and they add to the cytotoxicity of the phytocannabinoid. So phytocannabinoid is cytotoxic in cancer, but these terpene with very small contents, they do very great effect. Okay, so this is what, and also there is a dose specificity in mode of action. So in low dose, it has a different action. In high dose, it has a different action. And when you have a high dose, it should be the high dose of the whole plant itself, not just adding terpenes to it. I know we don't do that. So here, so once again, I've already shown you this. This is the intra-entourage effect, where you have CBD, CBDA, CBG, CBGA, CBC, CBCA, delta 9 TSCA, delta 9 TSC, delta 8 TSC, and TSCV. So all this, they have their own effects. So when they are combined, they give their own effects. And this effect is really very good. And when we add a small amount of terpenes, that is hardly 2%, that also show a different effect. So this is about some introduction about entourage effects. So if you have any questions, I'll take, or we'll go to the next presentation. Any questions? Because this topic I didn't discuss because in much detail, because it is not needed. We know already, because we use only plant medicines in this.
Yes. No, so far no question.
Okay. So then let us go ahead with the second presentation. So the second presentation is about the very important topic, which is largely troubling us all. Okay. So though I have put the topic it as obesity, but because obesity doesn't occur in alone. Today, we know that obesity is not a single disease. It is a complicated disorder. And there are so many causes for obesity. Every cause, every disturbance in endocrine system can lead to obesity, we know. And there is only one in which we can actually put the physiology to it, and that is the insulin. So if the insulin metabolism is not normal, we can say that that person is going to get obese. Okay, so I'll discuss some more when I do some more talks ahead as we go. So have you heard about Rimonaband? I think Vishal, have you heard about Rimonaband?
No,
Sun
sir. No,
Pharma
sir.
was going to launch this drug for anti-obesity. And it was really amazing
Oh,
because when they saw that in 1 week, people were losing about 2 to 3 kgs of weight. So this was like a new anti-obesity miracle, Rimonaband. So they were going to introduce this. And this, they said that it's a remarkable anti-obesity medicine. It is going, it was the headlines in the Times when they actually did. And this was the first reverse agonist of CB1 receptor. Rimonaband was the first inverse agonist of CB1 receptor. In otherwise, it is anti-CB1 receptor, and it worked like miracle. But then the CNF effects were so bad that they had to stop. Okay, so this is like, I can say this is a very good thing from one of my friend in Canada who made this interesting thing. So this is what we know, and this is what is still hidden about endocannabinoid system. So we know only this much, but these things are still largely hidden, all these things. So we'll discuss that as we go ahead. So this Ramanov band was a huge hit because it came in newspapers and they were touting that Sun Pharma or Pfizer, they're going to bring it out and it will come in various these things. Now this is what the statistics says. The prevalence of overweight, will double among Indian adults aged 20 to 69 between 2010 to 2040, while the prevalence of obesity will triple. This was the study done by the Indian government, Health Ministry. And they said that whatever the incidence is there in 210, in 240, by 240, it will double and the prevalence of obesity will triple. So it is very bad numbers when you see this. Specifically, the prevalence of overweight and obesity will reach 30.5%. And just imagine how they have been studied. So in men, 30.5%, and in women, it is 27%. So you can imagine what will be the rate of obesity in Indian population soon that we will see. And we know that today, diseases that are associated with obesity are inflammatory disorders, irrespective of what they are, all kinds of inflammation, diabetes, right? Cancer. We know that obesity can really hinder the cancer and it can really nourish the cancer. The cardiovascular diseases, Alzheimer's disease, liver and kidney disease. Just because it is Valentine's Day, so the typing came as liver and kidney disease. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you. So it is liver and kidney diseases. Yeah. So musculoskeletal disabilities and immune disorders. So we know that obesity can cause all of this, and it is all these diseases that they can't be treated with the modern medical efforts. Even with the routine efforts, it's so difficult to treat. So that's why one scientist remarked that obesity is remarkably resistant to modern medical treatment, and there are no options left in India. Certainly, there are no options. You don't have any option for obesity in India because you ask them to do exercise. Oh, I can't do exercise. Diet control. Oh, I can't stop eating rice. These are the ones that our patients, they keep saying. Now, what are the metabolic parameters that we can use to diagnose? So fat mass, BMI, we know that just by the measuring BMI, height, weight, and weight mass, weight size, you can know the BMI of a patient. So that is the simplest one. The other thing is to know is leptin. So you can test for leptin levels. Okay. Then you can test for non-esterified fatty acids, so which are there in our body. And you can also test for liposaccharide binding protein, LBP. So these are the additional tests. This will give an idea about the future, what the future of this patient is going to be, especially if we are going to treat the lifestyle disorders. Apart from the routine testing, these tests are must. Okay. Now, just because I wrote about leptin, so you should understand what is leptin. Okay. Leptin is a hormone which is secreted by adipose cells in our body. So these adipose cells, they secrete leptin, and leptin is taken through the blood-brain barrier into the hypothalamus, where it actually controls the appetite. It is also known as satiety hormone because it signals the brain that you should stop eating. So that's why in general terms, if I want to put leptin is personal trainer. So if you have adequate leptin levels in our blood, it will act as a personal trainer for us. There is no laziness, where the person remains active, the person eats less, he's aware of what he's eating. So leptin controls appetite by signaling to stop eating, like satiety hormone, like as I told. And it helps regulate energy expenditure. It helps maintaining the body weight. So this is leptin. Hardly people know about it. As it is released from adipose tissue, leptin amounts are directly connected to an individual's amount of body fat. So if the leptin levels are high, means the person is very fat. If the leptin levels are low, it means that person is adequately thin. So that is the importance of leptin. So about insulin, we have discussed in one this thing. Again, I'll discuss about insulin in one more lecture about mTOR when we are going to do. So when we are, saying about leptin, then you have to also discuss about ghrelin. Ghrelin is another hormone. This is the hormone that causes the hunger cramps. So it is also called as hunger hormone. So it is produced by stomach and small intestine. So this hormone is also produced by pancreas, and also in brain also it is produced. So we don't know how it is produced in brain and all those things. So it is called as hunger hormone because of its role in controlling the appetite, leading to storage of the fat. So suppose if the ghrelin levels are more, the person will tend to become more fat. So ghrelin also plays a role in pituitary glands function, where ghrelin receptors trigger stimulation of the hormones, the pituitary hormones. It appears to help control insulin release, as well as it plays a protective role in cardiovascular health. So again, when we are doing with mTOR and all these things, I'll discuss more details about this. So these two hormones, I wanted you to know that there is something called as ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and there is something called as leptin, the satiety hormone. These are also very important in obesity, so that we understand how obesity is going to have effect. Now, this was a very important conclusion by one scientist. He said that a food's long-term obesogenicity is modified by its complex effect on satiety, glucose insulin responses, hepatic fat synthesis, adipocyte functioning, brain craving, the microbe of gut, and even the metabolic expenditure. It's he completed the definition of obesity and the treatment, everything in just one sentence. I was so shocked at this guy's research. He's just amazing. He said that food, how does the food decide that this food is going to make you obese? So it is a very complex. So you should see satiety, you should see glucose insulin responses, you should see the hepatic fat synthesis, adipocyte functioning, brain craving, the microbe in the gut, and also the metabolic expenditure. So this is, if you can remember these things, you can treat virtually any case of obesity by modifying the food itself. Because you take a detailed study about that, find which they hate, give that kind of food to them more, so they become satisfied with what they eat. And you see in glucose insulin responses. So glucose insulin responses are high in carbohydrate diet. So low carbohydrate diet is very good. Hepatic fat synthesis, because if all the glucose that is being used by the body is all converted to fat in liver, that is also not good. Adipocyte functioning, in other words, leptin function, brain craving, again, leptin and ghrelin function, all these things. So we know today the obesity and all these kind of metabolic disorders are becoming epidemic. It is a pandemic actually, but what to do? WHO has some other terms to decide on pandemic. Now here, this is one guy that I want to quote, Dr. Joseph R. Kraft. So we call him the father of insulin assay. He said something that those with cardiovascular disease not identified with diabetes are simply undiagnosed. His statement came after years of study. He said that those with cardiovascular disease not identified with diabetes, somebody has cardiac disease, but they said that he doesn't have diabetes, are just simply undiagnosed. Because diabetes is, you see, every case of cardiac disease, ultimately they get diabetes after a certain time. And that is because they are not able to, they are very short-sighted in this thing. And diabetes is a vascular disease. So I want to talk something about this Dr. Joseph R. Kraft. He was a doctor for the, the secret forces of America. So after he's completed his service, and then he came back to America, he found that, when he had left America, people were all slim and smart. And when he came back, people are fat and idiotic. So he said, let me do. So he did a study, and he did something, various studies he did. He even suggested to the American Heart Association that your definition about low fat diet is wrong. don't go for low fat diet, it is wrong. But nobody listened to him. It was only in 2015, after persistent efforts from people like us, that American Heart Association told that it is not the fat food, but it is the carbohydrate intake that is causing diseases. So this Joseph R. Kraft in 1975 only had told about this. So he had done insulin assays. So he used to test insulin in fasting, and then he used to test insulin in 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and 5 hours. And then he saw that there is a definite curve. Have I included that slide? No, I didn't. So there is a definite curve. So the insulin goes high, and then it should go back to normal. So and he saw that only 20% of the people actually fitted the normal category. Rest of the 80% who didn't have any diseases, not diabetes, nor cardiovascular disease, they had a bad way of metabolizing insulin. And then he's found that those cases which had this bad way of metabolizing insulin, where there was persistent insulin levels in their blood, they were ultimately diagnosed with cardiovascular disease and diabetes in later on their life. That's when he said that if you have a heart disease, if you don't have a diabetes, it is simply undiagnosed. Actually, it is the insulin that is causing the disorder, not anything else. So he was the first guy who actually said that you need to decrease your carbohydrate levels in your food and increase the fat levels. So that's why he actually started this LCHF diets. Though I'm not in favor of LCHF diet, I'm in favor of balanced diet. So now let's see what does adiposity causes in like in atherosclerosis. What are the things that happen? So inflammation and adiposity, these are the things that we see in a typical obese person. All these things are affected. So since there is increase in lipoprotein lipase enzyme, so you see that interleukin 6 and lipoprotein lipase enzyme, this causes inflammation. So there is inflammation, there is dyslipidemia, there is hypertension, there is insulin resistance, there is type 2 diabetes, atherosclerosis, thrombosis, fertility is lessened, dementia, you see cancer, you see liver and gut issue, and also premature aging. Obesity leads to premature aging. And what is the things that are going inside? So you start from the left. So you see that the tumor necrosis factor alpha, it is raised. And I've told you in the insulin pathway that it is because of the insulin that tumor necrosis alpha increases. So we'll discuss it again more detail. So I'm giving you tidbits of knowledge so that when I discuss about mTOR, you already know the basics. And then you will understand mTOR, because mTOR is not just about one thing, it is about the whole life. So if you understand mTOR pathway, you understand the whole life and disorders, including cancer. So there is increase in tumor necrosis alpha, there is increase in C-reactive protein, there is increase in interleukin 6, lipoprotein enzyme lipase, that also increases. It increases the angiotensin enzyme, which is secreted by kidneys. So you see that there is increase in free fatty acid levels, and these free fatty acid levels actually increase insulin, thereby causing insulin resistance. It is increase in insulin-like growth factor 1. So there is increase in resistin hormone, there is increase in leptin, there is increase in lactate, which causes the acidity in the blood. There is increased in plasminogen activator inhibitor. So this plasminogen activator, what it does, it inhibits the intra arterial clot formation. So if the intra-arterial clot formation inhibiting factor is high, so you don't see atherosclerosis and thrombosis in those people. And this is also seen in COVID. Plasminogen activator inhibitor actually rises in COVID also. So this decrease in adenopectin. So all these things are going on when a person grows fat. Such a complicated disorder. Once you understand this, you'll say that it's better to remain, skinny than grow fat, because such a huge range of effects. Now, what does endocannabinoid system do here? So we know that endocannabinoid system is important in energy homeostasis, whether it is brain or liver or adipose tissue and skeletal muscles. So we know that these endocannabinoids are lipid derivatives that activate the cannabinoid receptors. AEA or anandamide and 2-AG are elevated in obese individuals. That has already been studied, as well as they are elevated in type 2 diabetic. So that's why they said that there is dysregulation of endocannabinoid system that is causing the obesity. So altering CBD1 receptor or CB2 receptor directed signaling can impact positively or negatively upon energy metabolism. We know that. And endocannabinoid system can modulate mitochondrial integrity and function. We know that also. So these are the effects that we see about endocannabinoid system. So the endocannabinoid system is constantly busy in trying to repair all these things. But what will happen if this goes unregulated or the regulation is very bad because of diet and various factors? Okay, so we know that the physiological function of endocannabinoid system is all this: food intake, appetite, energy balance, lipid and glucose balance, homeostasis, neuroprotection, inflammation, and pole modulation. We know that endocannabinoid system is constantly doing this, right? So we need to enhance this functioning. So now I want to just discuss some more. I keep increasing your knowledge about endocannabinoid system, okay, tit by tits, because that is how it is. It's very, very vast. Now, this picture shows where are the receptors found, the CB1, the CB2 receptors. Since CB1 receptors are largely seen in nervous system and brain, they're also seen in liver. They're also seen in gallbladder. They're also seen in CB1 receptor, right? They're also seen in pancreas. They're also seen in heart. They're also seen in male reproductive system. The CB2 receptors are largely seen in peripheral, the immune system. But see, every system has CB1 and CB2 receptors. Now, this is what Dr. Vinceno Di Marzo, the Canadian research, he put a term, endocannabinoid dome. So he said that apart from AEA and 2AG, there are a whole set of other things. On the left, PEA, SEA, OEA, these are like anandamide-like endocannabinoids. And on the right side are 2AG-like endocannabinoids. So all these molecules, they form the extended endocannabinoid system. And they have effects on various other ways. Not only just on CB1, CB2 receptors, they have effect on GPR 55, 18, 110, 118, TRP V1, TRP V2 and V4, PPAR alpha and PPAR gamma receptors, and various other receptors. So like I had shown you the initial slide. So here it is. Okay, so we know only about this, and all these things are hidden, and this whole thing constituted as endocannabinoid. So you have GPR3, GPR6, GPR12, whole set of receptors. All this research is still going on. And then you have the CBDV, CD, CBG, then terpenoids, flavonoids, synaptomides, and all these various others which are there in the extended endocannabinoid system. So all these, they work in synergy. So when there is dysregulation of endocannabinoid system, you can imagine all this goes haywire. Okay, so this is the extended endocannabinoid system. So now, how does these affect in obesity? So this was the research paper. In the same paper, which was said that obesity-related alteration in endocannabinoid system are associated with excessive CB1 activation. So obesity actually causes CB1 activation because of continuous food intake, there is upregulation of endocannabinoid system, and this upregulation actually increases the food intake because it stimulates the appetite. There is mitigation of energy expenditure. The energy expenditure goes haywire, so the body doesn't expend as much as it should, and there is accumulation of fat in adipose tissue. So this is what is seen in excessive CB1 activation. In extended endocannabinoid mediators like PEA, OEA, all these things, they also influence the non-cannabinoid receptors like PPAR receptor, TRPV1 receptor, and G protein coupled orphan receptors. And these receptors, they also go up-regulated because there is inflammation, because there is increased insulin, because the small adenopectin, all those things, hormones go haywire. So the whole thing goes upregulated. So the endocannabinoid system and extended endocannabinoid system both goes upregulated. So actually in obesity, you see upregulation of things. Now what actually does? So if you see the best observation was this. So the cannabis use causes rapid and long lasting down regulation of CB1 receptors. That is the interesting thing about cannabis. If the system is upregulated, it down regulates. If it is down regulated, it upregulates. That is how amazing is cannabis as such. So if you give in an obese system cannabis, so what it does is it down regulates the CB1 receptor. So when the CB1 receptor is down regulated, you see that there are so much changes. The first changes is the high receptors which are already there, they all attract the cannabis. And you see that there is down regulation of the whole system. The fat system, fat also regulates this. The inflammation also regulates it. Means there is down regulation of inflammation. Inflammation also goes down. The hormones also, they keep changing, because when the whole inflammation goes down, then you see those. So though it is, we have seen that if you give THC, it upregulates. Same thing, if you give only THC, there was one paper which I'm not mentioning, that this, if they had given only THC and though it didn't increase the obesity, but it rapidly progressed to the cardiovascular disorders. So that's why they say, no, you should avoid THC in cardiovascular disorders. But if you give the cannabis plants, if there is upregulation, it downregulates. If there is downregulation, it increases it. That is the best thing about entourage effect. Now, what are the other things? So this was another very important observation in the same paper, which was Tim. So there is a complete dysregulation of endocannabinoid system in obesity. So you see that the leptin deficiency, which is there, that also causes activation of endocannabinoid system. So if there is leptin deficiency, that also causes. The influence of diet. This is very important here. And this was actually very well researched. That's why I kept all these points as it was there in the paper. So the influence of diet and obesity on the endocannabinoid system was found in this way, that if there is long-chain polyunsaturated fat acids like arachidonic acid, linoleic acid, if they are more, they actually increase the brain concentration of anandamide. So if somebody eats more polyunsaturated fatty acids in their food, that increases the concentration of anandamide. CB1 down regulation upon CB1 fat feeding. So if you feed fat, what actually it does is it down regulates the CB1 receptors, because when you give them more fat, especially the PUFA or polyunsaturated fatty acids, it has a down regulate, it causes a down regulation of CB1 receptor. That was second thing. And high fat feeding, if it was given, that also increases the concentration of 2 Ag in adipose tissue. So you see, this was to show that high fatty food as high fat food content doesn't harm anything. It actually is stimulatory. Though the effects are not so markedly affected, it's a long-term effect, but the effects are like this. So there is increase in endocannabinoid system, there is increase in anandamide levels, there is increase in 2 Ag levels, not only in brain, but also in adipose tissue. Okay, and this CB1 stimulation, they cause enhanced insulin and glucagon secretion, whereas CB2 agonism lowered the glucose dependent insulin secretions. Again, this also is affected by food intake, right? So all these things were researched, and these were found out that if you include high fats in your diet, like the traditional Indian foods, so they used to add ghee in almost everything. And just to say that ghee actually makes the bone strong, and we used to laugh being doctors. How can ghee, make bone strong? But the effect is here. The ghee makes the bone strong by regulating the endocannabinoid system. How amazing is that? All this while we were laughing. अरे घी खाने से थोड़ी हड्डियां बढ़ती है. But now we have a research which shows that because of polyunsaturated fatty acids that we intake, they increases the level of anandamide and 2 Ag, not only in brain, in peripheral tissues also, and that regulates the insulin. That regulates the insulin. How good is that, right? So then activation of peripheral endocannabinoid system in human obesity, what it causes? It causes increased secretion of 2-AG, especially in abdominal obesity. They have done this test and they have found out. And dysregulation of endocannabinoid system is but seen in obesity. So this is diet regulated. So just imagine if you take high fat diet, you are not doing any harm. You are actually stimulating the endocannabinoid system in a very small way. So has to be understood very well, that low carbohydrate and high fat diet is actually good, and the traditional Indian diet is actually very good. Okay, so this is that paper. So the activation of endocannabinoid system is a hallmark of obesity and explains the success of pharmacological CB1 blockade, that is Ramanoband and Tritonoband. These are the two drugs that they develop, but because of the side effects, they're not able to use it. But we can use as a whole plant extract, because the whole plant extract, if the system is upregulated, it downregulates. So that is how it helps in obesity. And this issue was in Journal of Endocrinology, my favorite. Now here is what happens in mitochondria. So in mitochondria, what actually it does, this is what happens. So in obesity, we see that there is increase of anandamide and 2-AG. So because of this increased circulating levels of anandamide and 2-AG, so there is upregulation of the whole system. And because there is upregulation, what actually happens is there is decrease in mitochondrial biogenesis. There is increase in fatty acid beta oxidation, and there is decrease in mitochondrial respiration. So upregulation of this system actually harms the mitochondria also. So they really don't know how this how the fatty acid binding protein affects. This is fatty acid binding protein, this tryptophan. So we know that because of calcium influx, the damage occurs and all these things. But how does this system respond to cannabis is very interesting. Because if we see that if you give cannabis, it should increase obesity, but it doesn't increase, because that is the intelligence of body. And that is the intelligence of cannabis as a whole plant extract. It does. And that is why they say that even CBD, which actually blocks the anandamide and 2-AG degradation, can increase the obesity. So plain CBD should never be used in obese individuals. So it is the whole plant extract that has to be used. So, and this is how the normal intake of fat causes this. The saturated fat, which is rich in palmitic acid, so they actually increase the triglyceride levels. So this triglyceride levels, what it does, it decreases the mitochondrial biogenesis. It decreases the respiration of the mitochondria. So I know this is a very complicated thing, but you should understand that this is how CBD endocannabinoid system works. So here, this was the most fabulous statement that I saw. And it was done in this special issue where medical marijuana laws, should, what effect it had in various states. So in this, there was this joint statement which says that cannabis not only improves the quality of life of many people, it also prevents many premature deaths. So if you don't want yourself and your patients to die prematurely, put them on cannabis, right? That is the best way. Now here, these are the certain observations that was there, and I love this observation. So regular cannabis users had significantly greater insulin secretion as defined by the insulinic index compared with never users. So regular cannabis users, they have significantly greater insulin secretion. So just imagine if there is the insulin secretions is greater, so that also have effect on obesity, that also have effect on various other disorders. Now, this was another study. So within this study, a positive correlation was found to exist between the amount of cannabis used in relation to a lower BMI. So in one study, evidence was shown that BMI was decreased even in cannabis users who had a higher daily calorie intake. in comparison with non-users. So people who use cannabis regularly, they have low BMI. Okay, is it good? Now, what does THC does? So if you use only THC, so that can actually increase the obesity that they say. So it increases the palatability of food, it increases the appetite, it increases the energy storage, it decreases the metabolic rate. We know that. That's why CB1 antagonist can increase metabolic rate by 49%. So rimonabant and tritonabant, they actually were very nice because they decrease the metabolic rate by 14 without doing anything. Just you take the CB1 antagonist and it just deals. And we know that THC also impairs the mitochondrial respiratory function by reducing the oxygen consumption because the overall calorie consumption decreases. So if you use THC, what can it do, right? So this is what I had to tell you from my side. Though I kept this presentation, open, so I have not ended it because of the factor that we can't end it. So here, my conclusion was that if you take only THC and if you use only CBD, that is actually going to be bad. Actually, that is going to be bad for the obesity. But when you use the whole plant, it can have a totally different effects. And that is what we saw from the whole presentation. So in obesity and in all metabolic disorders, the whole plant extract is the way to go because it not only decreases the obesity, it can have effect on overall metabolic factors. It can decrease the inflammation. And we saw that there was some research which showed that this particular whole cannabis extract can actually help in premature aging, right? So that was my thing. So that's why I kept this presentation largely open so that you can understand that it is not the THC or the CBD that is important in metabolic disorders. It's the whole plant, and the whole plant way is the way to go because it decreases the inflammation, it decreases the leptin levels, it may increase the Ghrelin levels. We don't have that study as yet, but it definitely decreases the circulating fatty acids. So the whole plant is the way to go in metabolic disorders. So you have any questions? I'll take.
What is the dose of this whole plant extract?
Pardon, sir?
Dose. Quantity of.
That's what they should know. It is a dose dependent. So if you give a higher, slowly and steadily you increase the dose, and slowly and steadily you see the effects on the person. Okay. Like I can give you my example only where I lost 18 kgs. First 3 months I took, then I gave a gap of 1 month, then again I took for 3 months. So in that I lost 18 kgs.
Can I start 50 milligram of whole extract?
Yes, sir. Definitely can start. Yeah.
50 milligram daily or twice daily?
No. You start daily once and see how it affects.
And who is manufacturing this whole extract in India?
Whole extract is manufactured by there is the Saket Industries and also Endogenics. These two people are doing that.
Okay.
Sir, I lost the connectivity in between. There was quite a gap. So what was the gist of it? The whole extract is to be used for obesity.
Yes. Whole extract is the way to go in metabolic disorders and obesity. So it is not just the THC or the CBD, because THC can actually increase the obesity.
But any particular whole extract, 1:10, 1:5, what is to be taken?
So usually all these studies were done with 1:1.
No. In Ayurveda, when we make the extract of the plant, what we do, we take suppose 10 kilo of the herb and boil it to 1 kilo, or take a 5 kilos and make it a 1 kilo. So which one to be made, and which species, like Indian species, or which one, like?
So this study was done with 7 different cannabis sativa strains.
Okay.
So in this wild varieties were not used because they don't know how this. So we in India we use the wild varieties. So I'm sure wild varieties are better. because of their cannabinoid content and also their flavonoid content. In wild varieties, the flavonoids are more than in ingrown varieties.
Okay. But in a whole extract, what should be more? CBD should be more or THC should be more?
Balanced.
That
One
is
is to one.
It should be balanced. Okay.
Dr. Tahir,
Yes.
are you using this cannabis extract yourself?
I used it, and now I am not using it. I used it earlier because we had a epidemic here. So we suffered a